There is something extraordinarily special happening in South Florida these days. It has become a hub of education entrepreneurship and emerging K-12 learning models, creating increasingly more abundant and diverse education options for families. I recently had the opportunity to spend several days in the Fort Lauderdale area gathering with these local microschool founders, and I'm just blown away by their warmth, their ambition, their entrepreneurial spirit, and their commitment to building more and better learning possibilities for today's young people. Shiren Rattigan is one of the incredible South Florida entrepreneurs I've had the privilege of getting to know. Shireen runs Colossal Academy, a beautiful and inviting microschool for Fort Lauderdale area middle schoolers. Shireen also does an incredible job of connecting local founders and other education entrepreneurs with each other and with the greater community, sharing resources, hosting gatherings, offering support and encouragement, and really helping to accelerate this entrepreneurial cluster of innovative learning models and schooling alternatives. I am so excited for you to get to know her and learn more about Colossal Academy. Shiren Rattigan, welcome to the LiberatED podcast.
Wow, what a great introduction. Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. It was such an inspiring visit for me to Colossal and to the greater Fort Lauderdale area, seeing all of the enthusiasm and energy around education, entrepreneurship, and innovation. But I want to start with your background, kind of the story of how you ultimately got to be a microschool founder. And it really started with you growing up in Chicago and then in Kenosha for your high school years. Your mom is a teacher. She has a doctorate in education. You then became a teacher and now, of course, a microschool founder. You told me when we met at Colossal Academy that your calling is to be a teacher. How did that come to be?
Well, I'm fourth generation educator. My great-grandmother was a one-room schoolhouse on a farm in Illinois. So it's I think it's in my blood. I think there is when you grow up in education, you naturally speak like an educator. You engage with the world as an educator. My grandfather is a superintendent of schools for his district, and my mother is a special education teacher for over 30 years in outside of Chicago in a suburb called Zion. And when you have that line and that legacy, I often rebelled against it, but that's where I spent all my summers, was organizing and helping her putting stickers on papers and learning how to be in the classroom in a lot of ways. And so I think that there's some inevitability of me becoming a teacher. All my cousins are teachers, all my uncles and aunts are teachers. It's just some inevitability to it, but a lot of resistance, right? So I was really not believing that that's what I was supposed to be, but every time I needed a job or every time I needed extra money, I'd be teaching a class because that just made the most sense and was the most comfortable place for me to be in. I think exposure and having people in the family in different areas and different careers will ultimately set some of the stage for who you will become. But I think down deep inside, I just knew how to turn on the lights for people. I knew how to connect information to their brain. And then if it didn't work that way, then I would try a different way and I would try. And I knew that there were lots of tools in order to so jump up and down and let's walk to the other side of the room now. And just really pulling lots of tools. And a lot of it comes from seeing how my mother dealt with her students and lots of joy and jubilance. So that just has always felt like a home base for me. And then I really understood it in my master's that definitely I'm supposed to be an educator.
Well, you definitely seem to be a natural teacher, a born teacher, just from getting to know you. It's very clear that this is your passion and that this is what you're gifted at. Just beautiful to see. But you started teaching in a Chicago public school. earlier in your career when you first became a teacher, and we're surprised by what you found there. You told me during our visit that you had to physically restrain kids at times, and that
Right.
you were
Yeah.
worried for your own health and safety being pregnant at the time. What
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that like?
So I was 8 months pregnant with my middle child, and I was restraining a kid on the floor, trying to break up a fight of something that had been reoccurring. It wasn't the first time I was breaking up this fight or the first, but it was the first time it occurred to me that I could lose my child. That this situation not only is it dangerous for people, the other students in the class, to the kids that are fighting, but also that I could miscarry. And then that was it for me. I finished the school year out. Well, I didn't. She was born in May, so I didn't actually finish the school year out, but I didn't return. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go wealthy. I'm going to go find a really wealthy school, and that's where I'm going to work. And so I did. And I love the academy, and I love knowledge production and what can happen when we are in what the academy has to offer. But what I found there is there was a lot of social emotional lacking, some social emotional. A lot of times it was negotiating for their grades rather than like what they've earned. And so I did learn a few things there, but I just wanted some more connection. I wanted to dive deeper. I really wanted to be in love with what we were producing together. And so I tried a Montessori school, and that was an interesting experience in that I wanted more academic rigor, and it's such a tie. I really love the academy. I love what can happen when we put our brains together and create things together using knowledge as our launching ground. And I just was missing some of that. And COVID happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think it's fascinating that you have all of these varied perspectives. You go from an urban public school to then an elite private school to then a Montessori private school. And it's still, it's a little bit like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You still haven't found just the right porridge yet. And so then COVID happens, you have this sort of sense that there's more, that education can be different, but you haven't quite put your finger on what that is. COVID happens, and then that gives you kind of that opportunity or that on-ramp to create something different. Tell us about what happened in 2020.
Well, in 20, I had my own students, so my own children. I have 3 daughters, and so I was watching what was happening on the end of the parents as far as distance learning. And I'm also teaching students during distance learning, and I knew how it needed to be done so that we could actually grow during that time. So a few families approached and asked if I would be the tutor for the coming year. And I said yes, because the risk was not really there. I wasn't making that much money, and so I wouldn't need to make much money, and then I could do it how I wanted to. So what I did was develop these kits that I would drop off every Sunday night at their house, and the learning would happen in a Montessori environment in front of them, not in the screen, but we're unboxing. So I would say, okay, go grab your red box, and it would be the box for slime, and then we would be talking about chemical reactions, right? Or manipulatives for math. Go grab your blue box. Let's go grab these math manipulatives. How can we make this formula work, right? And so it just kind of evolved out of there. And we decided we wanted to meet once a week, then twice a week, and then 3 times a week. And I wanted to offer this to more people. And I wanted it to be accessible, but I knew that the price point that I was at wasn't going to allow for a diverse socioeconomic background to access what I was offering. So I went the K-12 route, and in Florida, it's fairly, I wouldn't say it's fairly easy. There's definitely a learning curve there, but I will say that it is within our power to start these micro schools and really be a part of school choice here in Florida. So we were able to participate in the scholarship program, which really affords more than half of my students the opportunity to be with me by paying nearly half of their tuition. And then Bela pays for a bit more, but I was able to get the next step grant with Bela, and part of that next step went directly to pay for scholarships for young girls who are interested in entrepreneurship and science. So that's kind of the evolution.
So, I mean, it really really are one of these teachers that we read about, right? Who was motivated by COVID and the school shutdowns to create your own learning pod. You told me when we met that you were actually able to make slightly more money running your pod than you were as a classroom teacher, and that you were able to see that there was a pathway there for entrepreneurship. And then more and more people were interested in what you were doing and encouraging you to go further, from what was a sort of an informal learning pod to something more established, which ultimately became Colossal Academy. You have this beautiful freestanding home-like building in Fort Lauderdale. So tell us what Colossal is like today. How many students do you have? What are their ages? How often do they come? So on.
Well, we're a bit of a Frankenstein, but we definitely are hybrid. We do have the online track for some students that are just learn really well online and need like an accountability coach to make sure that they're, staying on top of it. I do still have people who are registered as homeschoolers. We have students that are here 3 times a week. And then we have full-time students. So in total, we have 30 students. We also have after school programming. And I'm also able to, now that I'm so fortunate to have a space is the biggest hurdle in South Florida. Real estate is astronomical down here. So since I do have been so blessed to have a space, I welcome other entrepreneurs to be able to use the space for very low cost or free, so that they can get off and running. And so I would say between the after school programming as well, we have about 50 students that come in and out after school. This is not one of the days though, or else it'd be really crazy in the back.
And I love this idea of incubating other microschools. I think you're right that space is a huge constraint for education entrepreneurs. That's true across the country. So any way that you can kind of provide those founders with an initial spot, which also enables them to have access to the scholarship programs if they choose, then can enable them to grow and blossom into another space down the road. So on the day that I visited Colossal Academy, Shireen, we were treated to delicious homemade ravioli with one of your educators who's a chef and who does all kinds of kind of farm to table lessons. The students were, so engaged and so enthusiastic. I know you also do a lot of kind of hands-on project-based work with your students. You help them to right now develop nonprofit organizations and kind of create that entrepreneurial spirit. What is a sort of a day or a week like at Colossal?
Sure. So some of the more hardcore academics are from 9 until 11:45, and everybody's on their own academic plan. So depending on the child is how we launch their academic plan. Some kids are using computerized. Florida Virtual is one of our affiliates that we work with. But I also use Mammoth Math for some of my homeschoolers. So it really just depends on that quilt of what makes them light up and work. So we work on the math, the language arts, the science, and the social studies before lunch. They have an hour break, unconstructed. I don't curate that time at all, where they're able to just be teenagers together. It's one of the most tragic things that we do to young people is to take their recess away, or try to construct play. And that's where they learn to become a group. They have the group dynamics. They have to solve problems on their own. They need to negotiate and have lengthy conversations with each other. And they also just play. They are running and enjoying and being in bliss. And then in the afternoons is when we have our specials. So currently the students are working in textiles, learning how to spin their own wool out of sheared sheep wool. And then on Thursdays, we are partnering with Project Flourish, who is a plant-based home economics educator. And so they're learning how to make vegan, very luxury meals that I don't know that students would have access to otherwise. So we've brought back home economics. They have vocalized they're ready to farm again, and it's time in South Florida to start putting our seeds into the soil. So we will start that this week. And then Fridays, we go surfing and we go skateboarding with an amazing provider, Surf Skate Science. They launch every every lesson with Surf and Skate, it launches with a STEM lesson before or after, so that they have an experience to tie with maybe Newton's laws they may be talking about, or this particular term they've been looking at aptitude and wavelengths and weather. And so then they have free time to surf and skate afterwards with professionals, literally professional skaters, and also some student skaters. So it's a beautiful partnership with that as well.
Yes, Tony and Yuli from Surf Skate Science will be on a future episode of the
They're
podcast
amazing.
and are just really a part again of this growing ecosystem of education, entrepreneurship, and collaboration, and exciting new learning models. So, when you're talking to prospective families, or perhaps some of my listeners who are new to this idea of alternative education or microschools, what do you say is the benefit? What's sort of the comparative advantage of these kinds of models compared to the conventional system?
Yeah, we work with the whole child and the system. Tomorrow we have a breathing and stretch with the moms, right? Like, so that we can keep our moms balanced who are supporting the students when they get home. We'll have other family days, but tomorrow just happens to be a breathe and stretch. So some of the benefits are you're coming into an amazing community of people who are actively working to raise their children and to have citizens that are wanting to do good in the world. But the other aspects are our test scores are incredible. These kids, once you put them on a track where they're comfortable, then they can learn. And we want to challenge them just enough so that they're out of their comfort zone, but not so far that they can't achieve, or that they start to feel bad about themselves. So, we have mathematics, and then we have math esteem that we also work on. Like, how do you feel when you present an answer? And so that's what I'm looking for, in addition to, do you know the formula for, volume or area? How do you answer a question? With what resin, which tone are you presenting the answer with? And we work on the confidence level that comes with the math esteem. So it's not just the mathematical understanding, but really all of the whole child that goes into, in this case, math. So, we have a good balance where we're making sure that everyone's in joy and in bliss and happiness, but there's a grounding there that is the academic level, so that they're prepared to launch into the world and hopefully to self-actualize before they're having to try to figure it out on their own as adults.
So I'm sure many people are listening and saying, this sounds like a magical place. Your tuition is about $14,000 for full-time. Which is out of reach for many families. It's slightly lower than what other kind of conventional private schools are in South Florida, but still, quite out of reach for many families. And yet many of your families participate in the Florida scholarship programs, which was a key priority for you in getting a building and signing up for that. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the scholarship programs work to increase access for your program?
Sure. So it depends. There's many different layers, but if you might have a special need, it could be dyslexia, it could be ASD, it could be a myriad of needs. You can sign up for what is called the Family Empowerment Scholarship for Unique Abilities, and that awards families pretty handsomely, and most schools that take the scholarship take it. So then, in our case, it would be a very minimal amount every month to pay. But then also the Family Empowerment Scholarship without the UA on there is for families that are in the income brackets that are, I don't know who does the magic math there, but within the income brackets of like a standard for a family, a family of four. And they've just raised the income level so that they can now serve a lot more families and give more choice to families. And then I also work pretty closely with a grant writer and myself late at night, tippity typing, but looking for other ways to afford the gap. At the end of the day, I have these amount of bills to pay. This is what the scholarship can pay. This is what is equitable and fair to the families. And then I do the legwork to try to find the rest of the scholarship money, some donations, other. The VELA grant has been a significant help in making sure that students have access to Colossal Academy.
So you started this learning pod, that was this private learning pod, without the scholarship funds. So it's possible to be an education entrepreneur without access to kind of school choice policies. But what do you think is sort of the intersection between school choice policies and education entrepreneurship? I mean, do you think that that perhaps is one of the reasons why there is this burst of education entrepreneurship in Florida specifically? Would you exist in some form without the scholarship program today?
I don't know that I would have been able to continue without it. I don't think that I would have been able to continue without it. Me personally, the first year was amazing, and I had these people that I could privately pay, and they are still with me, some of them that haven't graduated yet. But the thing that I think makes it possible, and like the kind of the formula that's happening here in South Florida, is that we have pretty open laws to what you can do as far as a school, right? So I think that there are a lot of other states where it's super rigid, and then that bureaucracy gets in the way of innovation. Like you can't be innovative if there's all these other steps. It's hard to run a marathon with hurdles as well. So I think having more school choice legislations, there are still some that would be awesome if we could work on making sure a few components, such as the actual building and zoning requirements, or being able to incubate for a couple of years. But I think that, and then having the school choice scholarships makes a huge difference, a significant difference in allowing me to be a school. I don't know that I would have been able to do it otherwise.
Yeah, and to serve a lot more students. I think that's your point too, is that you might have been able to continue with a handful of students who could privately pay, but it's not the kind of program that you're looking for, and not able to serve, as you say, around 30 students today. So there is that access piece. So you've mentioned that you're a VELA Education Fund grantee. VELA is a nonprofit philanthropic organization that provides grant funding to founders like you who are creating microschools and learning pods and homeschooling collaboratives and programming. What impact has VELA had on your work, and do you think on the overall entrepreneurial cluster in South Florida?
Yeah, I think I can think back to moments I'm a teacher. So I was born and designed to be a teacher, but I can think back to moments when I had the aha moments of how is business done in VELA meetup. We have monthly meetups, and often we're able to discuss and dialogue with each other. And I think that has a huge part for where I started to navigate my compass as to what Google search and what YouTube rabbit hole should I go down. But I think, and then obviously the funding is incredible to be able to get going. And I also think part of it is the validation that I am a school, that I get the accolade that comes with being an innovative educator. I think that gave me the confidence to continue to try, and then meeting other educators that were so similar and trying to do very similar things allowed me to see myself continuing and seeing models that have been around for 5 years or 10 years, what the trajectory could be. And then, in South Florida, there are lots of, in between Miami, Broward, and West Palm Beach, which is kind of considered the South Florida area, there are a lot of grantees. And so we've been meeting up and sharing tips on who to talk to, where do I go, what's a lawyer, how do I get insurance, all of the business aspects that we need. And then it's also local, like here is this guy, his office is 2 blocks down, go talk to him right now, I'll call him and tell him, like that kind of real deep connection that we have with each other in order to make sure that we're all doing well and understand that we're not in competition with each other, and that there's so many people that are ready to be served, and that each one of us has our students that will come to us when the time is right.
Yeah, so Vela is providing that financial support, but also it seems that they're kind of helping to activate this local community and bring people together and create that knowledge sharing and that support that's so crucial for, especially for new founders, as you say, who might not have ever run a business before, and might have a passion for teaching, but not necessarily know what organizational structure to go with, or how, again, like how to get insurance or sign contracts and so on. So it's really exciting to see. When I was visiting you at Colossal, you brought together a gathering of over 30 people, 30
was
kind of
great.
local education entrepreneurs in your space at Colossal on a Saturday morning. Many of them were Vela grantees, but not all of them. So, what brings them together? I guess, what is the common thread or the common characteristic that these education entrepreneurs share, do you think?
Um, well, I think we're entrepreneurs, and I think we're edupreneurs. And I don't, if you go to different meetings to meet other entrepreneurs, it's not the same kind of conversation you're going to have. Perhaps it might be on how to automate your systems. Maybe people are talking about automation, right? And there's something really special about meeting other educators. We need each other, meeting other educators who are edupreneurs, and only us can understand, right? We go back to our silos, and we're working hard. And then we have a place to be together with other people that we can feel inspired, feel connection, feel community to, so that we can fuel back up and go do the work we have to do. I think it's very similar to why professional development is so important for educators, is just to touch back in and what are the best practices? What's happening here? How do I continue to be the best at what I do? And I think that's kind of what we're creating together. And it's just a space beyond your teachers that you work with, beyond the parents that you work with, just the educators that really understand what it means to be up all night trying to mess with your QuickBooks. Like, there's only so many people on this planet that really understands what that is, and we have each other to lean on for those supports.
Yeah, so, Shireen, you've recommended the book, The Geography of Genius, which describes why certain geographic locations at certain times have become incubators of creativity and innovation. There's ancient Athens as an example in the book, Silicon Valley. We're now seeing these similar clusters of education entrepreneurship and innovation in various locations across the US, including, of course, the vibrant cluster of education entrepreneurship in South Florida. So you've talked about this kind of community building and knowledge sharing. Why else do you think that there might be this cluster of innovation and entrepreneurship happening where you are?
I'm going to get a little bit crunchy on you for a second, so please excuse
Yes.
that. But I think there has to be a systemic shift in the way that we do education. We are no longer in the industrial era where we need to have bells and desks. And I think on a collective consciousness level, we are all gathering pieces of it. And I think we're kind of constructing and putting it together and weaving it together. So I think the part of it is the education system as we know it is absolutely changing. And there was a prime moment for it. I think COVID really cracked it open. Everything was just completely exposed. And some people were ready to be the trailblazers of, okay, this is the way we're going, to fix and change that. I think that has a lot to do with it. I think it's just time. It's the end of an era, and the next one is super bright and super vibrant and super child focused and community focused, and centering the families and their needs, rather than industrial timers, bells, and kind of like the nuts and bolts of when we think of education. It's done. It's starting to fizzle its way out, but the new thing has to be rebuilt in its place. And it's really beautiful what's happening.
So COVID might have been the catalyst for a lot of this entrepreneurship and innovation, but you think it's here to stay, that there's no going back to the old system, that these new systems will continue to grow and develop because people like you are creating them and parents increasingly want them. I wonder what you see as the future of education in South Florida and across the US over the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, in my mind's eye, if I could have the perfect situation, there'd be lots of scattered micro schools based on interest of the, based of not only interest of the teachers, but interest of the families. So maybe we would have a colossal music school, or there'd be a lot of different models, but that places like the public school could be the center by which we could have um, team sports or theater or access to computers or a library, that those could still be in place but serve as a community center um, in a way that I think that micro schools could really need. We don't have those large systems that I think people still kind of are attached to, like the homecomings. And so that's kind of what the vision I think it's gonna happen. We're here to stay, absolutely. There's no going back, and it's just continuing to grow, and we just keep becoming more and more inspired by each other um, as each one pops up.
So Shireen, you continue to get grant support through the Vela Education Fund. You are a quarterfinalist with the Yaz Prize, which is a significant award for education entrepreneurs like yourself. So best wishes with that. There's a lot of momentum and support right now for your work. I wonder personally, what are some of your goals for Colossal and kind of growing as an entrepreneur over the coming years?
Yeah, I really understood that I was curating. I like to call myself a curator because I'm not really in charge of what they're going to learn and when they're going to learn it, but I'm setting a stage and curating a space for them and experiences for them. I do believe that in the future, we're going to have, my goal is to have 50 colossals around Florida, and that hopefully we have a model that's comprehensive enough that people in Texas and Arizona and California, those are the 4 states I'd really like to start to offer colossals model to, that within 10 years, we would be moving interstate into another area. Maybe by then we could be in states that are recognizing and seeing the value of what we're presenting. Sometimes business and innovation actually, does inform how we're going to do things. And so we'll see. We'll see. It's super exciting though. I'm excited to get my hands dirty and move to the next phase. But the other thing I was really understanding is that I'm creating this fertile ground for students, but now I'm understanding I'm also trying to create a fertile ground for teachers and educators. And that was a big shift for me this year, a safe place for teachers to be as well, where they can be creative and have deep connections and they can thrive and be seen as the professional because we are professionals. And so I think a lot of unprofessionalization has happened over the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, that would be reinfused, that educators could be the professional that they aim to be, and that this could be the school that they thought they were signing up for when they went into education. So there's kind of twofold: serving learners, but also creating a safe place to be a teacher.
Well, I hope that there are colossal academies in every community sooner than later. I love this idea that the goal is to stay small, to provide these
Right.
small, very personalized learning communities, but have many of them and grow that both within the state of Florida and elsewhere. So I wish you great luck with that and hope that, again, more families are able to access your incredible services sooner than later. The website, Shireen, for your program is colossal-academy.com. How else can my listeners find and follow you?
Well, we're on Instagram, and the kids just love to see themselves on Instagram. So definitely and they go crazy because they had so many views. So we're on Instagram and Facebook as well. I'm working on the LinkedIn and the Twitter, and it's just not there yet, but hopefully soon. So those are the 3 primary places to find us.
Well, best wishes for all of these future goals and for really continuing to support this ecosystem of education entrepreneurship in South Florida. Shiren Rattigan, thank you again for being on the LiberatED podcast.
Thank you.